To find out more about where this country is headed next, I sat down with Ambassador Omar Ghobash. He was born in 1971 and, as such, has had a front row seat to the transformation of the country, both as a diplomat and as an Emirati citizen. I began by asking him for his reflections on this, the Golden Jubilee.
It's just remarkable to see where we are today, 50 years later, to think that we went from a population of 300,000 in 1971 to a population of 10 million today. That in 1971 there were many, many people who thought that the Emirates wouldn't succeed at all as a federation. No federation has ever really worked in the Arab world. And for semi-literate Bedouins who are living on the edge of the Arab world, to be able to think that they might be able to form a federation that could succeed was something quite remarkable. That, of course, goes to the credit of Sheikh Zayed Al Nahyan, the founder of the Emirates, and really the major force to push for an idea of unity. Now we're in a much more controlled environment. We have some of the best infrastructure in the world. All of this kind of shocks people of my age at the continual pace of development, the almost anxious desire to move forward and make sure that we build something that is truly solid, truly independent of hydrocarbons, truly independent of anything that can pull us down.
I was recently struck by the words of Dr. Omar Ghobash, who is the UAE presidential advisor and former Minister of State for Foreign Affairs, who said recently, and I quote him here, "You think more about the next 50 years than you think about the past 50, paving the way for the new generation to take over the flag and the responsibilities that come with that. The regional neighbourhood," he says, "is difficult and getting more so." As we look to the next 50 years for the UAE, what does the country hope to be, hope to represent, here regionally and wider internationally?
I think if you go back 20 plus years, there are two interesting situations. First of all, the tragic events of September 11th, which kind of showed us the destructive power of radical Islam. For the last 10, 15 years, we've been very active in pushing an agenda of preventing Islamists from coming to power. We don't like to see the use of religion for political purposes. We're very much focused on that technocratic, results-oriented government. And our government is very much focused on pragmatic solutions to problems that we can easily identify. And that's what pulls us much more into the global sphere, where we're interested in the issues around climate change, we're interested in the issues around the ethics of artificial intelligence, the gender equality. These are all things that are actually engaging us and where we think that we'll be able to make positive contribution, not just at the local level, but at a global level.
That attempt to push back against political Islam has got the UAE, over the past few years, involved in the war in Yemen, in Libya. There is an effort at present to re-engage, build bridges by the UAE around this region and beyond. Just explain why.
Well, firstly, I don't think that we think in terms of those relationships being damaged. We were standing up for very, very important values. We were standing up for values that we felt were existential to our path. The other thing, another way of looking at it is that there are many, many meddlers in the Middle East, quite often from outside of the Middle East, but including within the Middle East. If we saw that political Islam or political Islamists were going to be armed with the resources of hydrocarbons, for example in Libya, then it was imperative that we take action. And I think we have taken that action, to varying degrees of success. But what we've clearly demonstrated to regional players who stand on the other side is that we're ready to put a blood and treasure behind our values, and that we will stand up for them. It has cost everybody in the region, but I think also the region has now kind of moved on.
When we look at the economic ties that are being fostered here, there's also the latest Emirati-Turkish rapprochement. Abu Dhabi followed Saudi Arabia's lead in lifting the regional embargo on Qatar. There's the Syria file, the foreign minister's recent visit to Damascus, and then we see outreach to Iran at present. There are observers who perceive the UAE's latest diplomatic and political actions as a retreat. Are they?
I don't think they're a retreat. They are a recognition of changed circumstances. Everybody's agreed that it's time to move on and perhaps engage with each other in a different way. People can continue fighting, but it's just going to reach a stalemate, it seems. We've all made our intentions clear. We've all made our values clear. And it's probably, time to move on to developing, sort of a different set of ties.
How do you read the recent rapprochement with Iran?
I'm not sure that rapprochement is the word. I mean, we don't hide the fact that we have a huge problem with their nuclear program. We have a huge problem with the way in which they're behaving across a large part of the Middle East, key countries, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Yemen, and that this kind of behavior we can't tolerate. However, at the same time, we are very close neighbors. The port of Dubai is a central logistical hub for the Iranian economy. And we have continued, of course, in compliance with global sanctions, we have continued to maintain that economic link to Iran. There's a sizable Iranian population here in the Emirates. And our desire is to see Iran playing a positive role in the region. Not to behave with such, I suppose, insecurity is the word, and to follow us in a sense and focus on developing their own economic resources. Iranian people, incredibly talented, incredibly wise, superbly educated. And they should be participating in a growing pie for the region rather than in spending their money and turning other countries upside down.
Your father, Saif Ghobash, who was, of course, UAE's Minister of State for Foreign Affairs and was sadly assassinated in 1977 when you were just a young boy. When you look at your father's tenure as a diplomat during the early years, what kind of lessons do you draw from that experience?
Far fewer lessons and more questions. As I look back on my father's life, I realize more and more that he was a person who was oriented towards social and economic justice. He wasn't necessarily a political animal. He wasn't there for the promotion of his own career or his own interests, personal or public. And so the question then kind of became very clear to me that young people should also think about these things. Are you willing, and under what circumstances are you willing to sacrifice your time and energy for a greater cause, which is, in the case of the Emirates, the building of the country and the provision of education and so on. What is the price of idealism?
As an Emirati, what are your hopes and what are your fears for the next 50 years?
My hopes are that we get on with really building this country, and it's kind of, I'm pretty sure that we're going to do that. My fears are what happens when you become so we are compelled essentially to become a global player. We're compelled by economic circumstance to open ourselves up to the forces of global economy. And that's very exciting to a large extent, and we're attracting some of the best talent in the world. At the same time, we're exposing our local Emirati indigenous population to tremendous forces. And we need to make sure that we're able to equip our young men and women and the next generation after them with both a sense of identity and a sense of, I have to say, ruthless efficiency in understanding what we're doing, understanding how to take advantage of all of the infrastructural spending that we have made in this country, and to make sure that the Emirati benefits from it just as much as the smart, savvy outsider.